All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're cracking open the Vassago archives to walk through what is essentially a dark political thriller. It's a fascinating, terrifying historical record of a fatal miscalculation made by the rigid, hyper-efficient bureaucracy of the Iron Provinces. Ultimately, it's a story about the absolute danger of confusing appearance with rank and the absolute psychological horror of what happens when a group of arrogant mortals mistakes an ancient god for a simple low-level clerk. Now, this quote right here, this perfectly sets up our entire story. It completely hits at the core of human arrogance. We're looking at a really chilling examination of what happens when human beings equate a quiet, plain appearance with weakness. You see, the mortal officials in this text didn't fail because they saw a terrifying demon and panicked. No, they failed because they genuinely believed a throne would always announce itself with fire and brimstone. They actually thought they'd outgrown the old primal terrors of the dark. So, let's start with Section 1, the illusion of control. I want you to picture the 12 mortal administrators of the High Council of the Iron Provinces. They're seated around this massive black iron table deep below their western citadels. And keep in mind, these aren't priests or prophets we're talking about. They are cold, calculating administrators of conquest. And they truly, genuinely believe they had successfully commodified the occult. Just look at their language. After the rise of the emperors of borrowed shadow, they stopped calling demonic bargains what they actually were. Instead, they used these detached, dry legal terms like strategy, science, or the invisible hand of statecraft. If a lesser demon could turn a population's fear into obedience, well, the council simply made fear a recognized government ministry. They literally codified whispers into law, completely masking their dependence on dark forces behind a veneer of mundane bureaucratic efficiency. And the deep irony here is just staggering. The council controlled these three lesser demons, a literal voice hiding inside documents, a pain bender for their frontline armies, and a tiny ash-colored entity that literally fed on state propaganda. And because they controlled these three, the council arrogantly assumed the unseen world was basically just a market. You know, a place where power could be neatly purchased by category and managed with paperwork. They completely mistook their administrative efficiency for complete mastery over the demonic realm. They honestly thought that because they could draft a binding contract for a lie-eating spirit, they were the undisputed masters of the universe. Which brings us to Section 2, the human mask. So a new visitor arrives at the Citadel calling himself Belial, and the council immediately consults their absurd, crude little taxonomy of the supernatural. Now, Belial doesn't wear a crown of shadows or breathe fire. He wears a plain, dark scholar's coat and gloves. He bows with the exact, perfectly calculated politeness of a low-ranked clerk. And looking at their taxonomy, where they think feathers mean messenger and smoke means tempter, the council assumes that a human form means the demon is useful, sure, but incredibly weak. They completely miss the fact that Belial, a literal king of the Gosha, was using this plain human mask as a deliberate, razor-sharp tool for political manipulation. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew humans instinctively trust a familiar, plain face for all the wrong reasons. And you have to look at the deep psychological horror playing out in the room's dynamic here. On one side, the mortal officials are just flush with this false, arrogant confidence. The Prime Minister is practically beaming, boasting, thinking they've just cornered another minor demon to exploit. But if you look at the low-ranked demons already in the room, the tone shifts to pure, mounting terror. The ash-colored thing folds itself completely flat beneath the table. The pain bender literally backs into the wall until it's nothing but a stain. They are utterly paralyzed. They feel the crushing, unspoken pressure of a much, much higher crown entering the room, and they are desperately trying to become invisible, while their foolish human masters proudly dig their own graves.
Let's look at Section 3, a bureaucracy of fear.
Entirely oblivious to the silent, screaming panic of their own supernatural servants, the council decides to try and weaponize their legal system against Belial. They decide to employ him for the conquest of Western nations. And just look at the absolute absurdity of this contract. You've got 8 lawyers, 3 treasurers, and 1 terrified spirit hiding inside the punctuation marks, drafting a binding agreement for a king of hell. And they don't ask for souls. No, that would be far too crude for them. They ask for influence. They use this dry, suffocating legal contract as a weapon of political manipulation, basically asking for the right to legally define extreme violence as order and absolute subjugation as civilization.
Now, when Belial reads this contract, he notes, rather mildly, that they simply want the world. The Prime Minister, completely masking his imperial greed with statesmanship, claims they just want stability. And here Belial acts as this incredibly patient tutor observing human arrogance. He defines their own version of stability right back at them. He says, all conquerors do. They merely define stability as the exact moment everyone else stops resisting. It's brilliant. He completely exposes how their sterile administrative language is just a shield hiding the brutal, bloody reality of their empire's endless hunger. And this chilling exchange marks the precise moment the trap begins to close. The Prime Minister, getting annoyed, tells the supposed clerk that he speaks above his station. Belial just calmly places a single, gloved finger on their rigid, meticulously drafted contract and corrects him. No, I speak beneath it. I mean, the sheer irony here is palpable. You have human power trying to enforce bureaucratic hierarchy on a sovereign being older than dirt. Moving to Section 4, the fatal demand. So, the War Minister, a man who has conquered entire cities with borrowed whispers and believes himself to be an entirely practical, serious man, finally loses his patience. He slams his hands firmly on the black iron table and officially orders Mario to kneel. Now, I want you to put yourself in the shoes of a terrified mid-level clerk standing in the corner of that room right now. Suddenly, the room doesn't just go quiet. It goes officially still. It is this detached, horrifyingly bureaucratic stillness, an agonizing silence that suddenly feels infinitely heavier than normal gravity. You are a bureaucrat sensing the power dynamics shift so violently it makes you nauseous, watching the reality of your entire empire unravel in real time, as if time itself just received a stamped memorandum instructing it to wait. And from the viewpoint of the lesser spirits, we see absolute, unfiltered panic. The ash-colored thing forgets how to even be ash and becomes pure distilled fear. One spirit literally shrinks its entire existence to hide inside the head of an iron nail. This overwhelming, silent terror radiating from the lesser demons is what truly, finally exposes Belial's actual hidden rank. The mortals might be blind to it, but the supernatural hierarchy absolutely cannot lie. But here is the crucial point. The mortals completely misread this shift. To a man trained only for loud, chaotic violence, silence just looks like a gap waiting to be filled with his own authority. The guards grip their weapons tighter. The War Minister, entirely mistaking this immense supernatural silence for hesitation, actually doubles down. He aggressively heaps insults onto a god, loudly calling him a polished imp and a useful servant who had forgotten gratitude. It so perfectly contrasts the council's chaotic, blustering human pride with Belial's terrifyingly quiet, sovereign power. Which brings us to Section 5, a throne revealed. So, Belial does not transform into a monster of fire or smoke, because if he did, the humans could just blame their fatal error on his disguise. He denies them that comfort. Instead, he stays a man in a plain coat, and the room physically bends around the pure meaning of who he is. The massive iron table bends downward by the width of a breath. The banner on the wall physically inverts to show a gate inside a crown. And worst of all,
Every single hypocritical oath ever spoken in that chamber becomes audible for one agonizing heartbeat. Imagine the pure, stomach-dropping psychological horror for the Prime Minister in that fraction of a second. The crushing weight of a god physically proving that your civilized bureaucracy is nothing but a parade of crimes. Imagine hearing your own voice echo back at you, promising peace while actively planning a famine.
Belial completely shatters their illusion that power must always be loud and theatrical. He removes a single glove to reveal a hand so purely, terrifyingly human it is almost unbearable to look at. And with this quiet, absolute authority, he speaks, "You call the useful low, the loud strong, the beautiful harmless, and the obedient safe. I am Belial." He lays it out exactly why their rigid habit of judgment just killed them. They mistook courtesy for weakness, and they completely failed to recognize a true sovereign when he walked through their front door.
Now, miles away from the citadel, we shift to Elyar Ben-Sael. He's a mortal who has been changed by his own contact with higher powers, and he nearly collapses from the sudden metaphysical dread of this moment. He feels this massive shift in the universe. He senses a being of vast, ancient power, choosing the absolute terrifying disguise of utter humility. Elyar understands instantly what the council failed to see until it was too late. A throne is bowing, and the mortal world is utterly unequipped to handle a king who doesn't need to shout to be obeyed. Finally, Section 6, the price of misrecognition. When Elyar Ben-Sael finally arrives at the council chamber with religious witnesses, the officials are shockingly still alive. He asks Belial why he let them live, and Belial answers with this cold, detached logic. Education. Punishment is simpler. You see, Belial doesn't destroy their precious bureaucratic machine. He literally weaponizes it against them. He embeds supernatural consequences directly into their administrative efficiency. If an official uses the word peace to hide domination, a bell rings in their head. Orders for conquest literally return as waking nightmares to the bureaucrat who drafted them. Belial traps them entirely inside their own definitions of stability. As Belial walks out the servants' gate entirely unnoticed, he leaves behind a deeply fractured council. The Prime Minister is frantically burning documents. The War Minister is desperately seeking even stronger powers to save himself. And this is the harrowing final lesson of the archives. The human face is the most dangerous mask of all, precisely because we are so desperately wired to trust it. The mortal world is now wide open to infiltration by beauty, scholarship, and law. The next demon won't need a shadow at all. So I leave you with this to chew on. In a world that only respects loud, theatrical displays of dominance, a world where we constantly mistake our own administrative efficiency for complete mastery over our inner demons, how utterly vulnerable are we to the quiet rulers hidden in plain sight? If a true throne doesn't announce itself with fire and brimstone anymore, you really have to ask yourself, who is sitting next to you?